Oh, well, good for you.
Good evening.
How about you?
I'm jealous.
My name is Usama Shami. I'm the chairman of the board of the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. I would like to welcome everybody that joining us tonight. Actually, this event, we usually do it during the month of Ramadan, the fasting month of Ramadan. This year, it did not work out for conflicts in the schedules. Adam was leaving on a trip overseas. The night that we chose was a special night for us. It was very crowded, so we decided to postpone it to some other time. However, when we postponed it, I was thinking Adam was going to a trip overseas and coming back. Ed is a friend of mine. I met him through work, and he also told me about an experience that he had with a trip that he made also to Palestine. So then we started talking. Ed was preparing a video that basically captured what he saw over there. Very nice video that we're going to show. And when Ed didn't know that I was Palestinian. Ed is in the bakery business. He has a very small bakery. That APS, I work for APS serves. So I was sitting in his office and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, I'm Palestinian. And he gave me this stare. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if he was going to throw me out of his office or whatever. Maybe he didn't understand where I was from. Then he said, "Well, I was just there." So, okay, I didn't know if that was good or bad. And then he started talking passionately about his experience over there. For a moment, I thought he was a Palestinian in the room. So he said that, "Well, I have a video." And I thought, well, this would be a good forum to show that video to people and share the experience that he had with his trip to Palestine. Now, Adam always goes to Palestine. I don't know, it's probably three times. Okay, 3 times. So I'm sure the IDF knows him by name. They know where he lives and all of that. So we're going to start tonight by showing this short video. And the reason I'm showing this short video is on YouTube. Actually, there's a lot of videos on YouTube. Because there is a myth that when Israel was established, Palestine was a land with no people. And that's a myth that a lot of people in the West take for granted, that it was, even if the people that were there, they were backward people, they didn't have civilization or culture. So we're going to start by showing this short video, just to let you know. We're gonna go through the presentations and then we'll have dinner after that. That's a way of keeping you, because just kidding. Bathrooms in the front, that's men's bathroom. In the back, there are ladies' bathroom. If you have any questions, we have a lot of volunteers. You can ask them. So we're going to start with this short video. Everybody can see this?
Oh, good.
the way from 1800. This is Jaffa.
Where's that, Gaza?
Iccp. That's Jaffa. So this just gives some pictures of Palestine before 1948. Actually, Palestine had a very vibrant economy. It had vibrant Christian population and Muslim population and Jewish population before 1948. So I just wanted to share this with you. Now I'm gonna give the mic to Ed. He can introduce himself, talk about what he does, and his trip to Palestine, and then we'll show the video he took while he was there.
Thank you, Osama. Well, thank you for having this event tonight, and I'm happy to be here. I'm a native of Phoenix, and just a little background on my family. My grandfather came here on a wagon back in the 1870s. He was a young man from Bavaria in Germany, and when he was 16, his mother and father, who would be my great-grandparents, decided that he needed to learn to speak English. So they sent him to England, where he was supposed to spend a year and learn to speak English. And so when he got there, when he got to London, he was mugged. He lost his suitcase, had the heck beat out of him, and so he didn't get the job and couldn't speak English, so he decided to go back to Bavaria. So when he got back on this boat where he thought he was going home, he and all these other young men were shanghaied, and they were not let off that boat for almost 2 years. And so when he finally was let off the boat, it was in some place called Philadelphia, which he'd never heard of. So now he's 18 years old, draft age, and this was about the time the Germans had conquered Alsace-Lorraine from the French. So he decided he probably shouldn't go home because he'd be drafted into the army. So he wrote to his father to let him know he was still alive and decided he was going to give America a shot. While he was on that boat, he learned how to bake because he was a cook. And so he then heard about a wagon train going to the west, hauling mining equipment to Colorado and the territory of New Mexico. So he applied for and got the job as a cook. So I can't imagine what that trip on a wagon train might have been like back in the 1870s, but I really wish I'd have known my grandfather because I have a lot of respect for anybody that has the guts to do something like that. So anyway, our family's been here ever since. We've been in the baking business, and I was sitting the other day talking to Osama about trying to get my power bill reduced. And before we got to that, I don't know how it came up, but I just asked him what his background is, and he told me, and I was literally stunned because I had just come back from Palestine. So, needless to say, it was a thrill. So one thing led to another, and here we are tonight. My little 1 week experience in Palestine and the West Bank was just exceptional. I've been very, very lucky in my life to travel because I learned so much when I travel, as we all do. And so I had just been in South Sudan before I went to Palestine, where I'm working on a solar project to electrify some schools there that have no power. And so I went to Palestine as a host. I was hosted by a group that I belong to called Young Presidents Organization. It's an international group. We have about 20,000 members around the world, men and women. We all are presidents of companies. We all have to employ so many people. We have to generate so many $1 million in revenue, and you have to be invited to join YPO. So the Palestinian YPO chapter in the West Bank and Amman hosted this 1 week experience that I was part of. There was 125 of us from around the world, and we were all there for one purpose, and that is to see what we could learn about this problem. Because as much as I read, as much as I try to keep myself up to date on what's happening, I've been just so confused about the issue at hand. And so I just felt that maybe by going there and spending a week with my hosts, Palestinian YPO members, that I could learn something and maybe make a contribution in some way. So what you're going to see is about a 16 or 18-minute video, which we just this week got onto YouTube, so you can access this thing if you want to show it to your family or friends, that I took with my movie camera. And I was fortunate enough to be able to capture a couple of people who were actually speaking, because this little movie camera has a microphone. So you'll see an interview with one gentleman in Hebron on a street where one night the IDF forces welded the doors of 1,600 shops closed. And this is many years ago. And it's just incredible to realize that 1,600 families had their shop welded shut one night for no apparent reason. Nobody was ever given a reason why. And all the merchandise still sits behind those doors that you'll see in this video that have been welded shut. Not one family has been able to reclaim their goods in their shop. So you'll see that interview. One day we were invited to have lunch with a Palestinian family in their backyard. And you'll see an interview with one of the daughters of that family who was trying to describe the reality of living in that part of the West Bank. She has been a college student, and because of the wall, she's basically had to drop out of school because she can no longer afford the amount of time that it takes her to go from her house through the checkpoints to get to school on time, after which then she has to go back through the checkpoints to get home. It sometimes takes 3 hours one way. So she's had to drop out of school. And you'll see that interview in their backyard as well. So I guess that's just about enough from me, but I can tell you this, I do have a greater understanding by a long shot of what we're dealing with here, and I just feel compelled to try to do something about it. It bothers me a lot, and so I've tried to document myself since I've come back. Unfortunately, I learned about some books that I should have read before I went, such as The Israel Lobby. If you haven't read The Israel Lobby, boy, that is a very, very, very important document. And two gentlemen wrote this book. The documentation in that book is exceptional. They have who said what when in every page of that almost 500-page book. And I think it would open your eyes like it did mine. I'm just reading another book now called Paris 1919. It's all about what happened just after World War I when all these states were created. And I had no knowledge of that until reading this book. There's a chapter in there about the Middle East, and there's another chapter I just started this afternoon about Palestine. So those two books are exceptionally informative, and I would just encourage anybody here to pick up those. You can get them on Amazon.com for a few bucks. So I'm happy to be here, and I hope you enjoy this little video.
Israeli guard tower, as you can see. Now, this is a building that is owned by the Palestinians, and yet on the top floor, to control things, the Israelis actually occupy and control things in this zone that we're walking into. We're looking at some shops here that are Palestinian shops, but due to Israeli military orders, these shops are not allowed to open.
One night, the military came well led by metal
Yes?
and closed 1,600 shops in one night for 1,613 effective. That has each of them an average of 5 to 6 people they are supporting.
Street here in Hebron, stores that were closed, and here is a little recap of the history. The stores were closed, 1,600 stores were closed over there. Merchandise still remains in the stores. Very old marketplace here. As you can see, some of the shops are closed, have been closed.
Gave it away
for many years. Still inside.
Gave it $5 to somebody to get there. She didn't know if it was toilet paper or what it was. She didn't want a $5 US dollar.
Israeli family. Whereas over to your right, you see an older building that belongs to a Palestinian family.
This is obviously better on YouTube because the sound is much better.
The first few shots that later on not quality.
this is a Palestinian home in the Hebron area, and it seems this particular home has been occupied, the roof has been occupied by the Israeli military as a checkpoint, as a viewpoint, whereas the Palestinian family continues to have to live here normally, accepting that occupation on top.
Maybe you know about Shuhada Street, you know about this area, which is, we don't have free in this area. Of course, Rita told you about Shuhada Street. For us, it's really difficult to move in this area because it's closed for Palestinians, especially if we want to go to, for example, to visit our relatives or grandmom or anyone. I have to come back early to my house because the area. And, you know, it's really, for me, I don't like to be late, especially at night because of settlers, because they will attack me anytime without, you know, if maybe they will on the back of me, so they will attack me. So it's really difficult to be in my own, so I don't go alone. Catch my brother. He was going to one area, so she catched him and took stone, big stone. She tried to put the stone inside his mouth, but luckily he just closed his mouth and she only crushed in his teeth. It was a court, but unfortunately Israeli law is not fair, especially with Palestinians. So they just let her move from Tel Rumeda to Giriat Arba area, which is very easy to come back by her car. 2 minutes she will be here. She came a lot here. She made also a lot of problems. Even she live in Giriat Arba. They always attack Palestinians. They don't care. Babies, old, women or men, they don't care. They just want to attack. So I live next to Baruch Marzel, which is, maybe you listen about him, the aggressive settler man in all of this thing. He make a lot of problems in Hebron, in Jerusalem, anywhere. You can find him anywhere. So he just want to make problems. You can Google him and read about him. He's really famous.
which we walked to eventually the Dome of the Rock, which, according to Islam, Muhammad prayed on this rock, and it was the most important site in Islam until Mecca became the hub of Islam. You can see these beautiful mosques here.
Inside, it has a very beautiful glass mosaic program, decoration program, which is until now original after so many restorations, but it's still original. The only change that took place in the 16th century in the building was the removal of the outer glass mosaic and replaced by Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Sultan, by this ceramic tiles. But inside, everything is still in situ and everything is still original, which makes it one of the few buildings in the world that kept its originality and authenticity until now.
What a beautiful mosque. What a beautiful mosque.
Where was that?
Oh, this was at the, Church of the Nativity, What was that altercation? Did I tell you about that altercation?
What we've just been told is that the police are assaulting a group of players, and there's quite a commotion within the walled city here. What happened, I guess, was some Jewish settlers were trying to block the entry of some Muslims into an area. You can see in one case the person with a red hat on is a group of Muslim performers, and they tried to block them from coming into this area.
Inside the city. So here it was after the war of 48. Palestinians were living here completely. Zero Israelis or Jews were living in the old city. Here, this is a Palestinian house. Beside it is a settler house. This is a Palestinian house. We'll walk up and we'll see.
You look at ancient mid-age paintings of Bethlehem.
He's the gentleman that's
this
leading
tower
the
and
group
the tower where we stood,
California.
which is not anymore there,
Dimitri.
and usually you see them very. Usually there were like 6 towers, but these two were really the major. So now basically this was a gate, and as all gates in the Middle East, they will open by sunrise and close by sunset. And those who come later, they have to stay actually outside. Exactly.
Was in the olive oil industry and olive tree industry, but all the trees were uprooted by Zionists, so they don't have any more trees. So now she's doing this to earn an income. أنا عم
The next few minutes, you're going to see portions of the wall. In front of you, as we come from the right to the left, is a Palestinian home that sits here in the midst of this wall. So, whether you want to think about property value, whether you want to think about quality of life, look at what has happened to this Palestinian family as a result of this wall.
That's the truth. It's coming.
Yeah, the guy that's fat.
Yeah. He's a member of YPO.
What this guy just did, you're a YPO walking with us.
He said, show me your passport. And I flashed my Palestinian ID. He said, you're Palestinian? I said, yes. He said, you cannot pass. I said, why? He said, you cannot pass.
That last interview was a friend of mine who owns some businesses in the West Bank. He's a Palestinian, and he was just describing to me, that he had been refused to cross through a checkpoint, and as usual, no reason was given. Had his Palestinian passport, and he was refused to go through that checkpoint.
Thanks, Ed. That's very nice. Very nicely done. Next speaker is my friend, my neighbor, Adam. So, Adam, why don't you talk about your organization, what you do, and while you're doing that, I'll set up the slide.
Thanks, Usama. It's great to be here again. Always an honor to get to spend time here. It's really a place of peace, and I cherish every time my family and I get to come, so thank you for that. I do direct an organization called Evangelicals for Middle East Understanding. Our goal is to change the conversation in evangelical circles, evangelical Christian circles, from what is mostly a one-sided conversation where most evangelical Christians are very supportive of the state of Israel, could be categorized as Christian Zionists, and there are many others in more mainline Christian denominations who have latched on to the Palestinian cause and have become very one-sided in their support of the Palestinians. We're trying to offer a middle road where we say, no matter where anybody is on the spectrum of caring about human beings, we believe that all humans are made in God's image, and whether they happen to be Israeli Jews or Palestinian Muslims or Christians, we want to show them respect and dignity that each human being deserves. It's a difficult road to hoe for an organization like ours because this is a very polarizing topic, and taking a middle ground where we're trying to say to people that we care about everybody involved in the Middle East is very difficult to do. But that's the position that we take because we believe that's what our faith requires of us. Jesus told us we need to love our neighbors and our enemies. So whoever we put in whichever category in our faith, if we're really trying to follow Jesus, we don't really have an option. So part of what we try to do is get people to be better followers of Jesus in the ways that they can have more balance in their approach to the Middle East and the people there. As Usama mentioned, I've been to the Middle East several times. This is my third trip to the Holy Land. And like all the previous trips, it was very exciting just to be in a place where so much is going on all the time. There's so much activity and so much history, but also depressing to know what's happening there and the way that it's destroying not only Palestinian society, but the way that the status quo also is destroying Israeli society, in my opinion. You cannot be an occupied people and have the kind of life that every human deserves. And I would argue that you cannot be an occupier and have peace in your heart either. So our struggle is to try to bring about reconciliation between all the people of the Middle East. That's all we're trying to do. People ask about political peace. Do you believe in a one-state solution, a two-state solution? And I like to quote my friend Sami Awad, who lives in Bethlehem, who is a Palestinian Christian. And he says to him, it doesn't matter if there's one state, 2 states, 10 states, 20 states. As long as people still hate each other, then we don't have peace. And so that's what we're trying to influence. That's what we're trying to encourage people on the ground who are doing remarkable work. Jews, Muslims, Christians who have chosen the way of peace, have chosen to love their neighbor in ways that are really inspiring. And so I chose some pictures here. I'll come over maybe to the computer so that I can do the show. I chose pictures that highlight some of the more hopeful interactions that we had. This was at a place on the Mount of Olives. In the background is the old city of Jerusalem. And this is one of the leaders of our gathering who, okay, this one's fine. Whatever you say, sir. And we had a brief teaching about when, in our tradition, when Jesus came over the Mount of Olives and saw the city of Jerusalem, he wept over the city because its inhabitants did not know the things that make for peace. And that remains true today. And so this was a chance for us to pray for Jerusalem, its inhabitants, and all of the people in the land. This guy is an Israeli who's working for peace. He founded an organization called Breaking the Silence. After his service in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, he could not live with some of the things he was asked to do as part of his military service, and was bold enough and brave enough to start an organization where IDF members, when they're done with their military service, can break the silence about the things that they're asked to do. And I highlight him because this organization, his efforts now with a group who's trying to restore the Palestinian part of Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, he has chosen to walk this path and has lost many friends, and family members have disowned him, and he's arrested all the time. But he represents for me hope in Israeli society that there are many people who want peace, who are working for peace, who are striving for peace. And to me, Micha's story is one that highlights that there's a vast diversity in in Jewish and Israeli society, and there are people who are working for peace, and I think we need to find out who these people are and encourage them and support them, because it's lonely work. It's lonely work for them. So he works for an organization now called Grassroots Jerusalem, and they're trying to do some community mapping of the various Palestinian areas in Jerusalem, because if you're not on the map, if your home is not on the map, then you are in great danger of house demolition and getting your land just taken from you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. As part of our trip, we visited the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. And part of what I try to do when I'm there is understand the narrative of the Israeli people. Not that I agree with their narrative. Understanding does not mean agreement, but understanding helps us to see what is going on for them. Where is this pain coming from? And that doesn't excuse what they've done with that pain. Please don't misunderstand. But it's important to understand what is the history, and even through lots of the propaganda that exists in the Holocaust Museum, is important to see, to understand what is this in their background that has caused so much fear, that causes the reaction and the way that they occupy the land now and the people. This is an Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem. You can see the giant key there that is a symbol of the Palestinian people who've been displaced, either in the West Bank or throughout other parts of the land. And this refugee camp is from just outside of Bethlehem. And here is a map of the land with all of the towns listed where the inhabitants were kicked out or left in 1948. This is at the checkpoint between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Westerners don't have to, I should say, white Westerners that look like me don't have to walk through this checkpoint. You can go and drive through, and it's a lot less cumbersome and a lot less difficult. But we wanted to go through walking and just experience a little bit of what the people have to do to cross over just to work between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, which should be a 5-minute drive apart from each other, but are not. So this is part of the dehumanization that happens, that Palestinians are made to feel a bit like caged animals, to go through the checkpoint. This is a fascinating organization called Tent of Nations. They sit surrounded by Israeli settlements in the West Bank, but it's a Palestinian Christian man who has a farm and works the land and grows olive trees. And you can see on the rock here, it says in a few different languages, "We refuse to be enemies." And this is his message. They can steal our land, they can take everything from me, but what they cannot take is the choice that I have to be an enemy or to refuse to be an enemy. It's very inspiring work that these guys are doing. They have to build underground, so they're constantly digging caves to have their activities and to store their water and things, because the surveillance of the Israelis, if they see that there's a new structure, then they'll try and come and demolish it. And this is part of their farm. If you travel throughout the West Bank, you'll see signs like this that say in Hebrew and Arabic and English, basically, danger. This road leads to a Palestinian-controlled territory, and it's dangerous for Israelis, and technically they're not allowed to enter these areas, and it's just more of the dehumanization that happens. This is in Hebron, which, as Ed was sharing, is just, there really are no words to describe Hebron. No. It is the epicenter of the conflict. To have over 100,000 Palestinians living in this city, with approximately 500 Israeli settlers there. And the 500 Israeli settlers are accompanied by anywhere from 600 to 800 Israeli soldiers. So more than one soldier for each settler. It's a very difficult place because it's fairly deep inside the West Bank. These are where they're the most extreme settlers, and they're there because the tomb of Abraham and some of the other patriarchs are there as well. And this is part of the market that Ed was sharing about. I'll skip through some of this. This is inside the Ibrahimi Mosque, and our guide was showing us where they've sealed over the steps that lead down to the actual tomb of Abraham. And they've sealed it over ostensibly because it's too small and people can't fit in there. Maybe there are other reasons, I don't know. This was probably the most difficult of the meetings that we had. This is in a village outside of Jericho, near the Jordan River. We met with this family. There are 6 brothers in this family. And earlier this summer, the Israeli army demolished 5 of the 6 brothers' homes. What makes this situation especially difficult is the fact that this family had papers from the Israeli military that said that their homes were not under threat of demolition. They had permission from the Israelis to expand their homes. They had done everything correctly, had the right lawyers, had the right, all the right papers in order. And one day when the men were all off at work, the soldiers and the bulldozers came, and the mothers were told, wake up your kids and get them out of their house. In some house demolitions, which are horrible no matter what the situation is, but in some situations, the families are given some time to remove the valuables from their homes. This was not offered to these families. I've brought home a piece of one of these homes that was demolished as a reminder to me to pray for these people, to continue to struggle for justice, for reconciliation in the land. This entire situation was just gut-wrenching, just awful from beginning to end. When we pulled up to these homes and got out of our cars, some little Palestinian boys began crying. And I thought, well, that's odd. I don't see very many Palestinians cry very often. And little boys are pretty tough usually. So I thought maybe one of them had gotten in trouble. Well, we soon found out that these little boys, when we got out, I guess they thought we looked Israeli, and we were there to finish the job, there to finish taking their things, destroying their home. And that just really highlighted what I was saying before to me, that this conflict, this situation is utterly destroying both societies. How a young boy like that can have that level of fear and hatred in his heart, but also the fact that he's going to grow up and the only people that he knows from the other part of society are the ones that destroyed his home. And this was just another inspiration for me and a motivation to continue to work for reconciliation. So here are a few of the pictures from this village. The families are staying in these tents that are meant to last for 2 or 3 days, and they've been there for 2 or 3 months. So these are some of the boys that thought we were Israeli at the beginning, and once they realized we were friendly, were smiling and laughing and carrying on. And it reminded me that no matter what, how bad situations are in our world, life goes on. Young kids smile and they run and they play and they just live life as best they can. And I continue to be inspired in these situations by the resiliency of the Palestinian people and the way that they've refused to quit on life. They've just continued to say, no matter what happens, we're going to continue to live. We're going to continue to struggle in our lives, but we're going to continue to live under occupation or not occupation. And when I go and visit and hear these stories and see these things happen, I'm not a violent person, but I'm just really struck by the ability of Palestinian people to to not always choose violence. It's really remarkable to me, the way that people are embracing nonviolent action, are embracing marches and standing in front of bulldozers and all of these activities that are resistance but are nonviolent resistance, and it's remarkable to me. We also met with a rabbinical student and asked him some very tough questions, and he was very gracious to us, and it helped us to kind of understand again a little bit of the story from a Jewish perspective, and men like this who are saying what we're doing is wrong and we have to find ways to fix it. And this, Ed showed this in his video, but all along the separation barrier on the Palestinian side are scripture verses from the Quran, from the Bible, that speak to the power of resistance, but the power of love, the power of continuing to live life. And so this is an example of that. Oh, and that's something different. That's not public information. So just in summary, I just wanted to say that those of us who are in churches that have traditionally taken sides on this issue and have taken sides in ways that have really negatively affected Arabs in general and Palestinians in particular in the Middle East. I just want it to be known that there are folks that care. There are folks that are working and striving and praying and speaking out against what's happening. Again, not with hatred in my heart, but with love for all the people there who are being negatively affected by the situation. And yeah, I wanted to leave time for questions as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. I guess this is the best time for question and answer. Anybody has a question? So either Ed or Adam. I'll start. I just would like to ask both of you about your experience with Israeli authorities, flying in and out. I don't know if you were harassed or if you were asked any questions and extra questions. So I'd like you to share that experience. Which one?
I'll start. People ask me, am I afraid ever in the Middle East? And my answer is always, the one place I'm ever afraid is in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. And that's an honest answer. In the Israeli airport is the only place I'm ever afraid, because I've heard so many horror stories of the questioning and the detention and all of the crazy things that can happen there. I was very fortunate not to receive a whole lot of extra questioning, although for some reason they were very concerned that I had Jordanian visas in my passport, even though Israel and Jordan are at peace, which was very interesting. And that highlighted to me the reality that a political peace does not mean real peace between people. That the person at the airport was concerned about me going to Jordan just showed that there's still a lot of fear, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of hesitance, even when there's technically peace.
My experience was on the first day we left Amman, Jordan on a bus, and we got to this checkpoint, and we got off the bus, and we were off that bus, had to remove all our luggage, had to go through these lines with our luggage, had to sit over in a place that no air conditioning, and we were not allowed to get on that bus, back on that bus for 7.5 hours, and we were not given any reason whatsoever why we were being detained. I was with another 30 some odd people from all over the world. These were not Middle Eastern YPO members. These were people from Hong Kong, from Australia, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from the United States, from Canada, from England. And we stayed in that space for 7.5 hours. No reason whatsoever. I was there probably about the second day that we were there. I just I don't know about you, but, and I'm not a violent person unless somebody puts me in a corner. And I guess we all have a point where we might possibly become violent. And I guess I have to admit that there is a point where I could become aggressive. And I have to tell you, after being there for about one day, and I'm not exaggerating, I was with my Palestinian friends, and I just said, you know what? If I were a Palestinian, I'd probably be in jail, because I wouldn't put up with what this Israeli government is doing to you people. An interesting thing that we learned during this week we were there was the makeup of the Israeli population. Because if you know anything about the Likud and the Zionists and the Labor Party, you know, I guess if I was saying a prayer right now for transitional government in Israel, I'd be praying for the Labor Party to take over, because I think if the Labor Party was in charge of that government, there could be a deal. On the other hand, the Likud is in power, and they formed a coalition with the Zionists, which are way over here along with the Ku Klux Klan and people that none of us can relate to. And they control that government, and as a result, we know what we have. But it's just absolutely appalling, is about the only word I can think of, for human beings to be doing this to other human beings in 2013. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, question? Oh, Fatih. Yeah.
Can you hear me from here?
Yes.
Okay, I have a small comment and then a question. I don't see any difference between Labour Party and the Likud. Actually, the Likud and the Zionists, they do what they need to do aggressively, and they would challenge for everybody. But the Labour Party, they just do it the same thing and maybe worse, but they make some kind of cosmetic way of make it looks gentle and nice. It's the same. The other question is this very important and valuable stories, tragedy stories. What's the difficulties and the obstacles if we need to place this information in the major media, televisions or talk shows? Thank you.
Well, you obviously know more about Israeli politics than I do, but I was just kind of repeating what I've learned from some of my Israeli friends, which I find interesting, because since I've been back, I've been very careful to discuss this trip with my Jewish friends. And I've been quite interested to see how interested they are in what I saw and heard. It's not anything in the form of rejection instead, my Jewish friends are quite interested in what I saw and heard and learned. And they have told me that, in their opinion, the Labor Party offers the greatest hope for a resolution. And I'm just kind of parroting what they've told me. I also brought to give to you, Sama, some written thoughts and questions, which maybe you could, if somebody else wants them, that'd be fine with me. Because as I read this book called The Israeli Lobby, the Israel Lobby, after I got about 100 pages into this book, I began to realize how profound their influence is over this country, over the United States of America. And I guess I then put my Palestinian hat on as if I'm a Palestinian to say, okay, if this is the nature of the beast, what do I need to do to equalize, to level the playing field, to give myself some sort of strategic advantage to where I can stand even ground with this force that's in place that truly has the control of this Congress. And make no mistake about it, they've done a magnificent job of doing what they have in place. And it's taken them 50 years to do this. And they've done, I give them an A for effort because they did it. So, having said that, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to overcome this. And I've got 4 or 5 pages of thoughts as I read the other 400 pages of this book that came to mind on how I would fight this, how I would try to overcome this in a legal, legitimate way, starting with getting organized, getting ourselves organized. So I've got it in the car, and I'll give it to you before I leave. I don't know if I answered your question.
I just want to add that, as I mentioned previously, I think a big job is to change the hearts and minds of evangelical Christians, because evangelical Christians are the largest voting bloc in America. And if members of Congress feel that they cannot vote their conscience and have to continue to vote in line with forces like AIPAC and the like, then nothing will change. I've sat in congressional offices where members of Congress have told me, I wish I could vote differently because I know what's happening. And so changing the conversation in churches is going to go a long way toward achieving that, toward giving freedom for people to have more balance in their approach.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you get out from Palestine, you have a storm with you.
Yeah.
How did the authorities of Israel let you know it? Maybe you threw them, or you give them to children of Palestine to throw them?
I hid it very deeply in my luggage. They did, but they didn't check in the bottom of my shoe. No, they didn't see it.
For anybody that didn't see a movie here in Phoenix about 2 months ago called The Gatekeepers, I would urge you to go on Amazon.com and buy that movie, and it's now out. It's been out about 4 weeks. The Gatekeepers is all about 5 or maybe 6 former people who were in control of Shin Bet. And I didn't know anything about Shin Bet until I saw this movie. Shin Bet is a very, very secret Israeli security force. And by law, the Israeli population always knows who is in charge of Shin Bet. Very visible person, I guess, appears on the news and so forth and so on. But that's the only person in the entire populace that anybody knows is in the Shin Bet. So it's kind of like the CIA, kind of like the KGB, modeled on that premise. And these 5 or 6 former heads of the Shin Bet are the basis for this movie called The Gatekeepers. The good news is that to a man, each of these people, each of these former heads of the Shin Bet are denouncing their own government. They are saying in this movie repeatedly how short-sighted the current policy of the Israeli government is. And these were the guys in charge of the most secret police organization in the Middle East. And that's the basis for The Gatekeepers. So I would urge you to spend 10 or 15 bucks and take a look at that movie. It's quite motivating and inspiring, and I was pleased after I saw it.
It's very good.
Pardon me? You're more advanced than I am. I had to buy the movie.
Okay, any more questions?
Where we can get those books?
The Amazon or Borders?
Yeah, Google.
Google.
Just Google.
معلش انا هقول كلمه يعني نشكر طبعا الاخوه على هذا الحضور الطيب وانا سعيد بكلمه ابني رغم انه هو عبر تعبير عن انسان اي انسان حر طيب ولما يخلينا كمان نعتقد ان الناس اللي عايشين هناك فعلا بيعانوا معاناه شديده جدا، وان المسؤولين منهم المسؤولين معظمهم اسر لامن الحب وليس لامن الارهاب. انا بشكر الاخوه على هذا الحضور الطيب والمشاهدات اللي قالوا وقالا على التعبير الطيب اللي حصل في وجهه لما كان بيذكر اطفال فلسطينيين والناس تهرب بيوتها حصل تاثر في وجهه فكان يبكي، فهذا شيء طيب. والمشاعر دي يوم من الايام هتنتقل ان شاء الله وتبدو شيء حتى يصير معرفه الحقيقه هي الاصل.
The Imam is, first of all, thanking both of you for sharing those moments that you spent in Palestine. He mentioned, Ed, that your expression is an expression of a free person, that when you saw what happened after one day, you realized how oppressed the people and how angry they can get. And then the Imam was saying that the conclusion is that for a lot of the Palestinians that are imprisoned in Israeli jails, they're imprisoned because they're free men, not because they're terrorists, because they had the same feeling as you had. And he commented on Adam's showing of emotions when you talked about the story of the children, that you were very emotional when you spoke about that. And the Imam was commenting that as long as those emotions exist, then one day they will overcome the oppression.
Inshallah.
Richard, do you have a question? No, okay. I just thought I saw your hand. Richard is hungry. Yeah. So anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Basically, when you speak from your experience about what you saw about the Palestinian issue and about Islam in general to Americans, what kind of a reaction do you get? Because the picture and the media reflection of the Palestinian issue and Islam as a whole is completely, not that true. And from your experience, what kind of a reaction do you get from the American public when you express your experience or your true reflection of the truth?
That's a good question. I haven't spoken to probably more than 50 people since I've been back. I was there in May. In any depth, I'd say to a person, they're stunned. I'm sad to say that many of my friends who are fairly current on the world news and world political situation, I am surprised and really disappointed that they're not more tuned into this. But having said that, I could say the same thing about myself before I went, because our news media is so slanted, and the information that we're talking about here right now is simply not available. At least if it is, I'm not aware of where it is. I guess Al Jazeera is now here, and maybe that's the beginning of a new spectrum of news, I hope, because I run around with a lot of people that know a lot more about some of this stuff than I do. I have a friend who's a Navy SEAL that I served in the Navy with, who is going to Palestine in a few months. And when I came back in May, his first comment was something to the effect that, Ed, I appreciate whatever you're going to tell me, but you have to understand, I'm in the Israeli camp. Now, this is a very, very bright person who worked in the CIA after he left the SEALs. He's made a fortune in Wall Street. Now he's a Presbyterian minister, and his entire population is anything but white. He's the only white person in the congregation. So this guy is a very interesting guy. He's a very bright guy. And so I've just made it my business. I'm going to convert him, whether he knows it or not, And the first step is I'm having him go to Palestine, and that's where I'll have him in the corner. He's not going to get out.
I find a wide variety of responses. But what I've found is most people's responses have to do with their experiences and their relationships. So when people have a strong reaction against me trying to tell them that Islam is a religion of peace, then I ask them how many Muslims they know. And it's usually none, or not very many. Same with, experiences about the Middle East. There's nothing that can change a person's mind more than seeing it for themselves. But I think through relationships is the best way to try to change someone's mind, because they know you as a person. They believe what you have to say. I think for me, one thing that's helpful is answering questions with questions. In our faith tradition, that's what Jesus did a lot. He answered a lot of questions with questions, because then it puts the onus back on people. Sadly, I think at the foundation of most people's hesitance to accept Muslims is this idea that we have to have an enemy, that this us versus them understanding. It was the Soviets, and then when that threat passed, we have to have something to fill that vacuum. And I think sadly, in some people's hearts, the threat of Islam has filled that void. So again, I'm trying to convert Christians to the idea of actually following Jesus, who came and said, I'm tearing down the barrier between us versus them. So as Gandhi said, one thing that would make the world a much better place is if you Christians would actually follow your Christ. So that's what I'm trying to do within my own tradition.
Well, I think we're going to conclude. I really appreciate Ed and Adam. I appreciate your friendship, both of you, and I appreciate that you're coming. We're going to have the nightly prayer. I know that we've been torturing everybody with the aroma of food. So we will pray, and inshallah, as any Middle Eastern home, this is your home, and any Middle Eastern invitation, it has to involve food and breaking bread.
Yes.
So inshallah, we'll pray, and then we'll break bread together.
Great, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,